Chapter 3: A Make-Believe Storm and a Real Squall. It should already be evident that Momo treated adults and children exactly the same way when she listened to them. But there was another reason why children liked visiting the old amphitheater as much as they did. Ever since Momo had arrived, they were able to play better than ever before. There just weren't any boring moments anymore. It wasn't that Momo made especially good suggestions for games. No, she simply played along. But for some unknown reason, whenever she joined in a game, the children always came up with the best ideas all by themselves. Every day they came up with new games, each more imaginative than the last. One hot and humid afternoon, 10 or 11 children were sitting around the stone steps, waiting for Momo, who had gone wandering around the neighborhood, as she sometimes did. Thick, black clouds hung low in the sky, and it looked like there was going to be a thunderstorm. "I think I'm going to go home," said one girl who had her little sister with her. "I'm afraid of lightning and thunder." "And at home?" asked a boy with glasses. "You aren't afraid when you're at home?" "No, I am," answered the girl. "Then you could just as well stay here," reckoned the boy. The girl shrugged her shoulders and nodded. After a while, she said, "But maybe Momo isn't coming today." "So what?" said another boy, who looked a little mangy and neglected. "We can still play something, even without Momo." "Fine, but what?" "I don't know, just something." "Just something is nothing. Who has an idea?" "I know what," said a fat boy with a shrill, high-pitched voice. "We could pretend that the entire ruin is a big ship and that we're sailing in unknown seas looking for adventures. I'll be the captain, you can be the first mate, and you'll be the scientist because this adventure is a scientific expedition, got it? And the rest of you can be sailors." "What about us girls? What'll we be?" "Girl sailors. It's a modern ship." The fat boy's plan sounded like a good one, and they tried to play, but they couldn't quite agree with one another, so the game never really got going. After a short time, they were all sitting on the stone steps again, waiting. Then Momo came. A wave whooshed by the Argo's bow. The exploratory vessel was quietly bobbing up and down in the swell while it swiftly pushed ahead at full speed toward the Coral Sea. Since the dawn of man, no boat had dared enter these perilous waters, which were teeming with shallow coral reefs and unknown sea monsters, and, worst of all, the so-called traveling typhoon, a hurricane that never came to rest. It wandered eternally across the ocean, looking for loot like a living, cunning beast. The hurricane's path was completely unpredictable, and once it had trapped something in its mighty embrace, it wouldn't let it go until that thing had been reduced to a pile of matchstick wood. Naturally, the Argo was specially equipped for an encounter with this traveling typhoon. Its hull was made entirely out of lower bainite, an extremely flexible stainless blue steel that was as strong as a sword blade. And through a special process, the hull had also been cast all in one piece without any welded edges or rivets. But even with a well-equipped vessel like the Argo, scarcely any other captain and crew would have been courageous enough to put themselves in such danger. Captain Gordon was extraordinary, though. From the steering deck, he proudly gazed down at his crew members, all of whom were tried and proven experts in their respective fields. Don Milu, the first mate, stood next to the captain. He was an old sea dog who had already lived to see 127 hurricanes. Professor Eisenstein, the scientific leader of the expedition, was further aft, on the sun deck, with his two assistants, Morin and Sarah, who, with their incredible memories, were like an entire movable library. All three of the scientists were standing over their various instruments, quietly discussing something in complex technical jargon. Mimosin, the pretty native, was sitting cross-legged a little farther off to the side. Every now and then, the scientist would ask her specific questions about certain unique characteristics of the Coral Sea, and she would answer him in her melodious hula dialect, which only the professor understood. The aim of the expedition was to discover the cause of the traveling typhoon, and, if possible, to eliminate it so that the sea would be safe for future boats to travel. But so far, everything had remained calm, and there was no sign of the storm. Suddenly, the man in the crow's nest yelled down, wrenching the captain out of his thoughts. "Captain!" he yelled, cupping his hand around his mouth. "Unless I'm crazy, I swear I can see a glass island up ahead." The captain and Don Milu immediately looked through their spyglasses. Even Professor Eisenstein and his assistants hurried over. They were all suddenly brimming with excitement. Only the pretty native remained seated and unperturbed. The mysterious customs of her people forbade her to show curiosity. They quickly reached the glass island. The professor clambered down the rope ladder on the side of the boat and stepped onto the transparent surface, which turned out to be so slippery that he had quite a hard time staying on his feet. The island was completely circular, with a diameter of approximately 60 feet, and it rose up like a dome in the middle. When the professor reached the very top, he could clearly glimpse a pulsating orb of light in the heart of the island, deep below the transparent surface. He shared his observations with the others, who were anxiously awaiting him at the boat's railing. "Well," said Morin, "we must be dealing with an Agummph Bitsenstalis." "Possible," said Sarah, the other assistant, "but it could just as easily be a Chalucala tapetafera." Professor Eisenstein straightened back up, pushed his glasses into place, and yelled, "In my opinion, this is an unusual variety of the ordinary Strumpus quietochinus, but we can only be sure once we've examined it from below." With that, the three girl sailors, who were also world-famous scuba divers, and who in the meantime had already put on wetsuits, plunged into the water and disappeared into the blue depths. For a while, all that appeared on the surface of the water were a few air bubbles, but suddenly one of the divers, a girl named Sandra, popped up, gasping, and yelled, "It's a giant jellyfish! The others are caught in its tentacles and can't free themselves. We need to help them before it's too late." And she disappeared again. 100 frogmen, led by their captain Franco, nicknamed the Dolphin, threw themselves into the water without a moment's hesitation. A massive battle ensued beneath the surface, which became covered with froth and spray. But even these 100 men weren't able to free the girls from the jellyfish's horrible embrace. The creature was too powerful. "Something in this water seems to be causing everything to grow extremely large," said the professor, furrowing his brow. "This is a highly interesting phenomenon." Meanwhile, Captain Gordon and his first mate had come to a decision. "Everyone back!" yelled Don Milu. "All hands on deck. We're going to cut the beast in half. Otherwise, we won't be able to free the girls." The Dolphin and his frogmen climbed back onto the boat. The Argo reversed a little and then shot toward the giant jellyfish at full throttle. The steel ship's bow was razor sharp, and it silently cut the jellyfish in two without so much as a shudder. The maneuver wasn't exactly safe for the two girls, but Don Milu had measured so precisely that the boat went right between them. The jellyfish's tentacles immediately fell to the side, limp and lifeless, and the girls were able to untangle themselves. They were received on the ship amid loud cheers. Professor Eisenstein stepped towards them and said, "It was my fault. I should have never sent you down there. Forgive me for putting you in so much danger." "Don't worry about it, Professor," answered one of the girls, laughing. "At the end of the day, that's why we decided to come." "Danger is our profession," added the other girl. But there wasn't enough time for a longer exchange. During the rescue mission, the captain and crew had completely forgotten to keep watching the ocean, and only now, with almost no time to spare, did they finally see the traveling typhoon on the horizon, racing towards the boat at breakneck speed. An immense wave picked the Argo high up into the air, spun it onto its side, and sent it plummeting down into a trough nearly 150 feet deep. After the first impact, many less experienced and less courageous mariners would have fainted or been swept overboard, but Captain Gordon stood wide-legged on the steering deck as if nothing had happened, and his crew stood fast just as calmly. Only the pretty native, who wasn't used to such wild sea voyages, had scrambled into a lifeboat. In just a few seconds, the entire sky had gone pitch black. The hurricane threw itself at the ship, howling and bellowing. It hurled the Argo way up into the sky, only to throw it back down into the depths of a watery abyss. It was as if the storm were growing more furious from minute to minute as it tried in vain to crack the ship's steel hull. In a calm voice, the captain gave out orders to the first mate, who then relayed them to the rest of the crew. Everyone was in position. Even Professor Eisenstein and his assistants hadn't left their instruments. Instead, they were calculating the location of the eye of the storm because the boat would eventually have to be steered toward it. The captain silently admired these scientists who remained calm and collected, even though they weren't familiar with the ocean in the way he and his men were. A lightning bolt shot down and struck the steel ship, which became electrically charged. Sparks shot out wherever anyone touched, but the crew on board the Argo had trained for months in preparation, so this barely affected them. The one problem was that the ship's thinner parts, steel cables and iron rods, for example, began to glow like the filament in an electric bulb. This made work a little more difficult for the crew members, despite the heat-resistant rubber gloves they had put on. Luckily, the glowing bits were soon extinguished by a downpour, heavier than any crew member except Don Milo had ever seen. The rain was so dense that it soon made the air too thick to breathe, and the crew members had to put on diving masks with oxygen tanks attached to them. Lightning bolt after lightning bolt flashed, followed by ever louder thunderclaps. The storm howled, and the waves, as big as houses, drowned everything under mountains of white foam. The Argo crawled forward, 1 foot at a time, fighting against the traveling typhoon, its engines running full steam ahead. Deep down in the engine room, the mechanics and firestokers were giving it their all. They had lashed themselves tightly with thick ropes so that they wouldn't be thrown into the open furnace by the boat's violent heaving and pitching. At last, after a long, toilsome struggle, the Argo reached the eye of the storm. What a sight! The typhoon had knocked flat all the waves at its center, and the water was as still as a mirror. An enormous being of some kind was dancing in the middle in this glistening mirror. It was standing on one leg, and its body grew wider and higher. It resembled a spinning top, the size of an inverted mountain, and it was moving so quickly that nobody could quite make out what it was. A shum-shum, gumilum shrikum, yelled the titillated professor while holding his glasses in place so that the torrents of rain wouldn't wash them off of his nose. Translation, please, grumbled Don Milo. We're simple seamen here. Leave the professor to himself while he does his research, interrupted Sarah. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. This gyro creature probably dates back to the very beginning of the Earth's formation. It must be more than 1 billion years old. Today, there is only one tiny subspecies left, which can sometimes be found in tomato sauce and very rarely in green ink. A specimen this big is presumably the only one of its kind that still exists. But we came here, yelled the captain over the howling storm, to eliminate the source of the traveling typhoon. Tell the professor to tell us how we can get this awful thing to stop spinning. Your guess is as good as mine, said the professor. I have no inkling of how to do that yet. Science has never had the chance to study this phenomenon. Okay then, reckoned the captain. We'll just have to shoot at it a few times and see what happens. How horrible, lamented the professor. Shooting the only existing specimen of a shum-shum galalumskum? But the counterfiction cannon was already aimed at the giant gyro creature. Fire! Ordered the captain. 2 blue flashes, each at least 100 feet long, shot out of the twin barrels. Naturally, there was no explosion because, as everyone knows, a counterfiction cannon fires proteins at its target. The illuminated streaks flew towards the shum-shum, but were deflected by the enormous vortex, pulled in, and then whirled around and around until they were finally catapulted up into the sky, where they disappeared in the dark cloud bank overhead. It's no use, yelled Captain Gordon. We have to get closer to the thing. We can't get any closer, Don Milo roared back. The engines are already running at full throttle, and it's barely enough to keep us in place. Do you have any suggestions, Professor? The captain wanted to know, but the professor merely shrugged his shoulders. His assistants didn't have any better ideas. It was looking like they would have to give up the expedition. But just then, someone pulled on the professor's sleeve. It was the pretty native. Malamba, she said with a graceful gesture. Malamba or situ sono. Ewini samba in salto lolo bing dra kramuna hein beni beni saduga. Babalu? Inquired the surprised professor. Didi maha fenosi iti ji donin malamba? The pretty native nodded eagerly and replied, Dodo afu shwata wawada. Oh, answered the professor, thoughtfully stroking his chin. What does she want? Asked the first mate. She says that her people have an ancient song that could lull the traveling typhoon to sleep if anyone were brave enough to sing it. Is that some kind of bad joke? Growled the Don Milo. A lullaby for a hurricane? What do you think, Professor? Sarah wanted to know. Is something like that scientifically possible? We should always stay open-minded. There is often a kernel of truth in the traditions of natives. Maybe there are specific sonic vibrations that have an effect on the shum-shum galalumskum. We simply know too little about its living conditions to rule that out. It can't hurt, decided the captain. Let's give it a shot. Tell her to start singing. The professor turned to the pretty native and said, Malamba didi osefa huna huna wawadu? Momo-san nodded her head and immediately began to sing a highly distinctive song that only consisted of a few different notes repeated over and over again. Ini meni alubeni wana ta susara teni. She also clapped her hands and jumped around to the beat while she sang. The simple melody and words were easy enough to learn, and slowly other people began to join in. Soon, all the crew members were clapping their hands and dancing around to the beat. It was quite a nice surprise to see that the old sea dog, Don Milu, and the professor were also singing and clapping like children in a playground. Lo and behold, the humongous top began to slow its spinning until it finally came to a complete halt and began to sink. The water thundered before engulfing it, and then the storm began to wane before stopping altogether. All of a sudden, the sky became clear and blue. The ocean became calm. The Argo stood still on a glittering mirror of water, as though nothing had ever happened to disturb its voyage. "Crew members," said Captain Gordon, looking every single person in the eyes with appreciation, "we did it!" Everyone knew he was a man of very few words, so it meant that much more when he added, "I'm proud of you guys." "I think it actually rained," said the girl with the little sister. "I, for one, am completely soaked." She was right. The storm had come and gone. The girl was especially surprised to discover that she had forgotten to be afraid of the thunder and the lightning while she was on the Argo. The children spoke for a while longer about their adventure, explaining certain details to each other and trading personal experiences. Then they split up to go home and dry themselves off. Only the boy with the glasses was not completely satisfied with the outcome of the game. As he was saying goodbye, he went over to Momo and said, "It's too bad that we let the Shum Shum Gulalum scum sink away without doing anything. The last specimen of its kind. I really wish I could have done some more experiments on it." But everyone agreed about one thing. They never had more fun than they did with Momo.
Darling? Like a dork. Yeah, but he's cute. How can you like a dork? Well, don't look now. Guess who? Goodbye. God, he's such a taupe, you guys.